They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I used to think that was just some dramatic line from a movie, something people said to sound profound when they were hurt. But now, sitting in my penthouse apartment overlooking the city lights, with my Emmy Award catching the reflection of the chandelier behind me, I finally understand what it means. Cold doesn't even begin to describe it. My revenge was arctic, calculated, and so perfectly executed that even now, 3 years later, the taste of it still makes me smile. His words echo in my mind even now. No one will ever want you. The way he sneered when he said it, like I was something disgusting he'd scraped off his shoe. The casual cruelty in his voice, as if he was commenting on the weather rather than destroying what was left of my already shattered heart. But Marcus always did have a talent for finding exactly the right words to cut the deepest. I should start at the beginning, shouldn't I? Back when I was naive enough to believe that love was enough, that if you gave someone your whole heart, they'd treasure it instead of using it as target practice. My name is Elena, and 3 years ago I was nobody. Not in the dramatic, self-pitying sense, but in the literal, brutal truth of it. I was a struggling waitress in downtown Los Angeles, sharing a cramped studio apartment with 2 other girls, surviving on instant ramen and the fading dream that someday, somehow, I'd make it as an actress. I was 26, and everyone kept telling me I was getting too old, that I'd missed my window. But I couldn't let go of the dream that had sustained me through a childhood in foster care, through community college while working 3 jobs, through countless rejections and humiliations. That's when I met Marcus. He swept into the restaurant where I worked like he owned the place, which, as I later learned, he practically did. Marcus Rothwell, successful entertainment lawyer, connected to every major studio and production company in the city. He was handsome in that polished, expensive way that screams success from every perfectly tailored thread. Salt and pepper hair, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that could charm the devil himself. When he focused that smile on me, asked for my number with the confidence of a man who never heard the word no, I felt like the luckiest girl in the world. For 6 months I lived in a fairy tale. Marcus introduced me to a world I'd only dreamed of. Fancy restaurants where the wine cost more than my monthly rent, premieres where I rubbed shoulders with actual movie stars, weekend trips to his house in Malibu where we'd make love on Egyptian cotton sheets while the ocean crashed outside our window. He told me I was beautiful, talented, special. He promised he'd help me with my career, said he had connections that could change everything for me. I was so stupidly, completely in love with him that I never stopped to wonder why a successful 40-year-old lawyer would be interested in a struggling waitress. I never questioned why he never took me to industry events as his date, always finding excuses for why I couldn't accompany him. I ignored the way his phone would buzz constantly with calls he'd step away to take, the mysterious weekend trips he'd take alone, the fact that I'd never been to his main residence in Beverly Hills. I was so grateful to be chosen by someone like him that I never stopped to ask what the catch was. The truth started unraveling on a Tuesday night in October. I remember the date exactly, October 15th, because it's burned into my memory like a brand. Marcus had been distant for weeks, canceling dates, avoiding my calls. When he finally agreed to meet me at our usual spot, a little Italian place in West Hollywood, I thought we were going to work through whatever was bothering him. I'd even bought a new dress, spent my tip money on getting my hair done, because I wanted to remind him of what he had. He was already seated when I arrived, checking his phone with that distracted air he'd developed lately. When he looked up and saw me, there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not anger, not sadness, just cold, calculated assessment, like he was evaluating a piece of property he was about to discard. "We need to talk," he said, and my heart immediately started hammering against my ribs. Those 4 words, spoken in that tone, could only mean one thing. I slid into the booth across from him, my hands trembling as I reached for the water glass. "What's going on, Marcus? You've been so distant lately, and I thought maybe I'm getting married." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually felt the air leave my lungs, felt the world tilt sideways around me. "What?" He had the decency to look uncomfortable for about half a second before his lawyer mask slipped back into place. "Her name is Victoria. We've been engaged for 2 years. 2 years! The length of time we'd known each other." The room started spinning, and I gripped the edge of the table to keep myself upright. "I don't understand. We've been together for 6 months. You said you loved me. You said..." "Elena." His voice was patient, the tone you'd use with a slow child. "Come on. You had to know this wasn't serious. Why would I know that? The words came out as a whisper, barely audible over the jazz music playing in the background and the chatter of other diners who were having normal Tuesday nights, people whose worlds weren't currently imploding. Marcus sighed, like I was being deliberately difficult. Look, what we had was fun. You're a beautiful girl, and I enjoyed spending time with you. But marriage? A real relationship? Elena, be realistic. Realistic about what? I was starting to find my voice, and with it, the first sparks of anger beneath the crushing weight of betrayal. That's when he leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting into something I'd never seen before, something cruel and dismissive that made me realize I'd never known him at all. The Marcus I thought I loved had been a performance, and now I was seeing the real man behind the mask. You're a waitress, he said simply, as if that explained everything. You live in a studio apartment in a bad neighborhood. You have no money, no connections, no real prospects. Victoria comes from the right family, moves in the right circles. She's an asset to my career, my reputation. She belongs in my world. Each word was like a dagger sliding between my ribs, precise and clinical. But he wasn't done yet. What did you think was going to happen here? He continued, his voice taking on that cruel edge that would haunt my dreams for months. That I'd leave my entire life for some nobody waitress playing dress-up at being an actress? Elena, you're pretty enough for what you are, but let's be honest about what you are. I should have left then. Should have thrown my water in his face, told him exactly what I thought of him, and walked out with whatever dignity I had left. But I was frozen, pinned in place like a butterfly on a board, unable to look away from the casual destruction of everything I thought I knew about my life. You're 26 and still chasing a pipe dream, he said, examining his manicured nails with bored interest. You've been in LA for what, 5 years? And what do you have to show for it? A few background roles that didn't even make it to the final cut? Face it, Elena. If you were going to make it, it would have happened by now. The restaurant felt like it was shrinking around me, the walls pressing in as other patrons continued their normal conversations, oblivious to the demolition happening at table 12. I wanted to defend myself, to point out all the progress I'd made, the callbacks I'd gotten, the acting classes I'd been taking. But his words were worming their way into my brain, echoing every doubt I'd ever had about myself, every cruel comment from casting directors, every rejection letter. Marcus, please, I whispered, hating how small my voice sounded. I thought we had something real. You told me you loved me. His laugh was soft and genuinely amused, like I'd just told a particularly good joke. Oh, Elena, sweet, naive Elena. I told you what you wanted to hear because it made things easier. You were so eager to believe it, so grateful for any attention from someone like me. It was almost too easy. The cruelty of it stole my breath. Not just the betrayal, but the premeditation. The calculated way he'd played with my feelings, manipulated my insecurities, used my dreams against me. I've been honest with you, he continued, signaling the waiter for the check. More honest than I needed to be, really. I could have just ghosted you, but I respect you enough to give you closure. To help you understand reality. Reality? I finally found some strength in my voice, some fire to burn through the numbness. Yes, reality. He leaned forward, his blue eyes cold as winter sky. The reality is that you're not special, Elena. You're one of thousands of pretty girls who come to this city thinking they're going to be discovered, thinking they have what it takes. But you don't. You're ordinary. You're forgettable. And the sooner you accept that and move on with your life, the happier you'll be. I felt tears starting to burn behind my eyes, but I blinked them back. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Not yet. So that's it? 6 months meant nothing to you? It meant what it was supposed to mean, he said with a shrug. A good time. Nothing more, nothing less. The waiter brought the check, and Marcus threw down a credit card without looking at the total. Always the gentleman, even when he was destroying someone's life. I have to ask, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Victoria, does she know about me? Of course not. His tone suggested the question was absurd. Why would I tell her about something that doesn't matter? Something that doesn't matter. 6 months of my life, reduced to those 5 words. He stood up, adjusting his tie with the practiced ease of someone who just completed a routine business transaction. Look, Elena, I'm not trying to be cruel here. I'm trying to be kind in the long run. Better to know the truth now than waste more years chasing something that's never going to happen. That's when he delivered the killing blow, the words that would replay in my head during the darkest moments of the next 2 years. He looked down at me with something that might have been pity, If pity could be so condescending. Face facts, sweetheart. No one will ever want you the way you want to be wanted. You're not leading lady material. You're not even supporting character material. You're background noise, and the sooner you accept that, the sooner you can find some nice, ordinary guy who'll be grateful to have you and build a normal, forgettable life. He paused at the edge of the table, straightening his expensive jacket. Then he delivered the final twist of the knife with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "No one will ever want you," he said, like he was sharing a profound truth. Not really. Not the way that matters. And then he walked away, leaving me sitting alone in that restaurant with the ruins of my life scattered around me like broken glass. I don't remember how long I sat there. Long enough for the waiter to come by twice asking if I was okay. Long enough for the dinner crowd to thin out and the restaurant to take on that quiet, end-of-evening atmosphere. I kept replaying the conversation, trying to find some moment where I'd misunderstood, where the Marcus I thought I knew would resurface and tell me this was all some horrible joke. But deep down, I knew better. The signs had all been there, I'd just been too infatuated to see them. The way he'd never introduced me to his friends, never posted any pictures of us together on social media, never mentioned any future plans that included me. I'd explained it all away, told myself he was just private, just taking things slow. I'd been so desperate to believe in the fairy tale that I'd ignored every red flag. When I finally made it home to my tiny studio apartment, the space felt even smaller and more depressing than usual. The bed where Marcus had held me and whispered sweet lies seemed contaminated now, the mirror where I'd gotten ready for our dates reflecting back a stranger, a fool who'd believed herself loved when she was nothing more than a temporary distraction. I called in sick to work the next day, and the day after that, I couldn't face the thought of putting on my uniform, of smiling at customers and pretending everything was fine when my entire world had just collapsed. I barely left my bed, surviving on stale crackers and tap water, letting my phone battery die so I wouldn't have to see the concerned texts from my roommates or the notifications from the acting apps I'd used to find auditions. Because what was the point? Marcus was right about everything. I was 26, and what did I have to show for 5 years in Los Angeles? A few dozen failed auditions, a handful of unpaid student films, and one brief stint as an extra in a commercial that aired exactly 3 times before being pulled. I was nobody, just like he said. Just another delusional girl chasing an impossible dream. The worst part wasn't even the breakup. It was the way he'd made me feel grateful for his honesty. Like he'd done me a favor by crushing my spirit so thoroughly. Like I should thank him for showing me the truth about myself, even if that truth was that I was worthless. For 2 weeks, I wallowed in that truth. I stopped showering, stopped eating regular meals, stopped looking in the mirror because I couldn't stand to see the pathetic creature staring back at me. My roommates tried to help at first, bringing me food, attempting to coax me out of bed, but eventually they gave up. They had their own lives to live, their own problems to deal with. They couldn't spare endless energy on someone who wouldn't help themselves. It was during one of those dark afternoons, as I lay in bed staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a dying flower, that I started to get angry. Not the healthy kind of anger that motivates you to make positive changes. This was something deeper, darker, more corrosive. It started as a small flame in my chest, barely noticeable beneath the crushing weight of depression. But slowly, steadily, it began to grow. Who was Marcus Rothwell to decide my worth? Who was he to determine my future, to write me off like a bad investment? Yes, I was struggling. Yes, I'd faced rejection after rejection. But I was still standing, wasn't I? I was still fighting, still trying, still believing in something more than the small, safe life he'd prescribed for me. The anger felt better than the despair. Cleaner, more honest. I started thinking about Victoria, this perfect fiancée who was everything I wasn't. Rich, connected, appropriate for someone like Marcus. I wondered if she knew what kind of man she was marrying, if she had any idea that her Prince Charming spent his free time seducing and discarding waitresses like they were disposable entertainment. I thought about the casual cruelty in his voice when he'd dismissed me, the calculated way he'd torn apart my dreams. Not because he was angry or hurt, but because it was convenient for him. Because I was an inconvenience he needed to dispose of, and he'd found the most efficient way to do it. That's when the idea first started forming. Not revenge, not yet. I wasn't thinking that clearly. Just a simple, burning need to prove him wrong. To show him, to show Victoria, to show the entire world that Elena Martinez wasn't nobody, that I wasn't background noise or forgettable or ordinary. I was going to become everything he said I could never be. It started small. On a Thursday morning, exactly 3 weeks after that horrible dinner, I dragged myself out of bed and into the shower. I washed 3 weeks of despair out of my hair, scrubbed the defeat off my skin, and looked myself in the eye for the first time since Marcus had walked out of that restaurant. "No one will ever want you," I said to my reflection, letting the words settle in the air between us. Then I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was sharp and cold and full of promise. We'll see about that. I went back to work that day, apologized to my manager for the unexpected absence, picked up extra shifts to make up for lost income, and threw myself into the routine of normal life with an intensity that surprised everyone, including myself. But the normal life was just a cover now, camouflage for the real work that was happening underneath. Every spare moment, every break between shifts, every night after work, I researched. I studied Marcus like he was a subject I needed to master for a final exam. I learned everything I could about his life, his career, his connections. His social media profiles were privacy protected, but Victoria's weren't. She posted constantly, their engagement party, their vacation to the Hamptons, their friends and family, an endless round of social obligations. She was beautiful, I had to admit, blonde and polished in that effortless way that only comes from a lifetime of privilege. Her Instagram was a carefully curated display of wealth and status, designer clothes, expensive restaurants, charity galas where she posed with celebrities I'd only seen on movie screens. But as I scrolled through months of her posts, something interesting started to emerge. Marcus was barely in any of them. When he did appear, it was always in group shots or formal poses, never the casual, intimate moments couples usually share. She posted about their relationship like it was a business partnership, all surface and performance with no real warmth underneath. I started to wonder if Marcus was capable of loving anyone, or if Victoria was just another acquisition, another status symbol to add to his collection. The research became an obsession. I mapped out their social circle, identified the key players in Marcus's professional network, studied the entertainment industry power structure he navigated so effortlessly. I learned about his law firm, his biggest clients, his reputation in the industry. I discovered that he specialized in representing talent agencies and production companies, that his client list read like a who's who of Hollywood power brokers. And slowly, very slowly, a plan began to form. It wasn't enough to just become successful. Anyone could get lucky, land a big role, achieve fame through chance or connections. That wouldn't prove anything to Marcus except that he'd been wrong about my potential, which was merely an error in judgment on his part. No, I needed to do more than succeed. I needed to become so successful, so undeniably powerful, that he would have no choice but to recognize that he hadn't just underestimated me. He'd destroyed something precious, something that could have elevated him if he'd been smart enough to nurture it instead of discard it. I needed to become everything he'd said I could never be, and then I needed to make sure he knew exactly what he'd lost. The first step was obvious. I had to actually become an actress. Not just a struggling dreamer, but a real, working, successful actress. And for that, I needed to be better than I'd ever been before. Better than good enough, better than competent, better than talented. I needed to be extraordinary. I quit my job at the restaurant 2 months after the breakup. My manager thought I was crazy, walking away from steady income to chase the same dream that had been disappointing me for years. My roommates were less tactful in their opinions. But I had a plan now, and I'd saved enough to survive for a while if I was careful. I threw myself into acting with the intensity of someone whose life depended on it. Because in a way, it did. Not my physical life, but something deeper. My sense of self. My belief that I was worth more than Marcus's dismissive judgment. I took classes with teachers I couldn't afford, working part-time catering jobs to pay for sessions with coaches who'd worked with Oscar winners. I studied method acting like it was a religion, immersing myself so completely in character work that sometimes I forgot who I was when I looked in the mirror. I attended every workshop, every masterclass, every networking event I could find, building connections with other actors, directors, casting agents. But most importantly, I studied the business side of the industry. I learned about representation, about the unwritten rules that governed who got what roles, about the complex web of relationships and favors and obligations that really determined success in Hollywood. I realized that talent was just the entry fee. What really mattered was understanding the game, and Marcus had taught me that game better than any textbook could have. 6 months after that night in the restaurant, I landed my first real role. Not a starring part, not even a supporting role, but a character with actual lines and a name and a small but significant part in an independent film that was generating festival buzz. The pay was minimal, but the experience was invaluable. More importantly, it was proof that I was more than just another delusional waitress. I sent myself flowers on the first day of filming. Expensive ones with a card that read, "Congratulations on your breakthrough role, from your biggest fan." I made sure everyone on set saw them, made sure word got around that Elena Martinez was someone worth paying attention to. The film premiered at Sundance 8 months later. It didn't win any awards, didn't get picked up for major distribution, but it was good, really good, and I was good in it. The reviews mentioned me specifically, calling my performance luminous and a star-making turn from newcomer Elena Martinez. I cut out every review, saved every mention, created a portfolio of proof that Marcus had been wrong about my talent. But I didn't send them to him, not yet. This was just the beginning. The momentum from that first film led to others. A guest spot on a television drama, a supporting role in a studio comedy, another independent film with a bigger part and better pay. Each role was a stepping stone, each success another piece of evidence that I was building something real. But success wasn't enough. I needed to be smart about it, strategic. I needed to make sure my rise was visible to the right people, that my name would eventually reach Marcus through the industry channels he moved in. That's when I started paying attention to publicity. I hired a publicist I couldn't afford, understanding that perception was often more important than reality in Hollywood. I began appearing at industry events, not as a hopeful unknown, but as a rising talent worth watching. I cultivated relationships with entertainment journalists, made myself available for interviews and photo shoots, built a public persona that was confident and charismatic, and just mysterious enough to be intriguing. 2 years after Marcus had dismissed me as forgettable, I was anything but. The breakthrough came when I least expected it. I was between projects, taking meetings and reading scripts, when my agent called with an opportunity that seemed too good to be true. A major studio was casting for a romantic drama, the kind of prestige project that could make or break careers. The role was substantial, not quite the lead, but the female lead's best friend and confidant, a part that was funny and vulnerable and absolutely perfect for me. The catch was that it was a last-minute replacement. The actress originally cast had dropped out due to a scheduling conflict, and they needed someone who could start filming within 2 weeks. The audition process was expedited, just a single callback, but the competition was fierce. Every young actress in town was fighting for this opportunity. I prepared for that audition like my life depended on it. I dissected the character, found every emotional truth in the scenes, connected so deeply with the material that when I walked into that room, I wasn't Elena anymore. I was Sarah, the best friend who was secretly in love with her roommate's boyfriend, who had to watch the woman she adored make all the wrong choices while keeping her own feelings buried. I gave the performance of my life in that little conference room, and I knew it. I could see it in the director's eyes, in the way the casting director leaned forward during my second scene, in the charged silence that followed my final line. They called my agent that afternoon. I had the role. Filming was a dream, not because it was easy. It was the hardest I'd ever worked, 12-hour days in emotionally demanding scenes, but because I finally felt like I was exactly where I belonged. The director trusted my instincts, the other actors respected my preparation, and every day I got to do the thing I'd dreamed of doing since I was a little girl watching movies in my foster family's living rooms. But the real vindication came 6 months later, when the film premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival and the industry took notice. The reviews were spectacular, not just for the film but for my performance specifically. Variety called me a revelation. The Hollywood Reporter said I was magnetic in every scene. And Entertainment Weekly predicted I was destined for stardom. Within a week of the premiere, I had 3 new film offers and 2 television pilots wanting to build shows around me. My agent was fielding calls from studios that had never returned my previous submissions. Magazine editors who'd never heard my name were requesting photo shoots. I was no longer nobody. I was somebody people wanted to work with, someone whose name carried weight, someone who mattered in the industry that had once rejected me so casually. And that's when I began the final phase of my plan. Because all of this success, all of this validation, it was wonderful, but it wasn't enough. Marcus needed to know what he'd lost, needed to understand that the woman he'd dismissed as ordinary was now extraordinary. He needed to see exactly how wrong he'd been, how monumentally he'd miscalculated. He needed to want me again, desperately and completely, and then I needed to be the one to walk away. I started subtle. A few carefully placed mentions in industry publications, interviews where I talked about my journey and the people who doubted me along the way. Nothing specific, nothing that mentioned Marcus by name, but enough to plant seeds for anyone who knew how to connect the dots. I made sure to appear at events where his clients would be, premieres and galas where the entertainment law community gathered. I never approached him directly, never made any obvious attempts to get his attention. I just existed in his peripheral vision, successful and radiant and increasingly impossible to ignore. The first time I saw him after that night in the restaurant was at a film premiere 18 months after my breakthrough role. I was walking the red carpet in a dress that cost more than my old monthly rent, photographers calling my name, entertainment reporters asking for interviews. I felt like a completely different person from the broken waitress who'd sat in that restaurant watching her dreams crumble. I saw him across the lobby during the reception, standing with a group of studio executives, and for just a moment our eyes met. The shock on his face was everything I'd hoped for and more. I watched him try to process what he was seeing, the woman he'd discarded now glowing with success, surrounded by industry power players who hung on her every word. I smiled at him, not the hurt, pleading smile of the girl he'd known, but something cooler, more knowing, the smile of someone who held all the cards. Then I turned away and continued my conversation with a director who was trying to convince me to star in his next film. I didn't speak to Marcus that night, but I knew he was watching me. I could feel his eyes following me around the room, could sense his confusion and growing realization that the nobody he'd dismissed was now very much somebody. The power in that moment was intoxicating. After years of feeling small and powerless, of accepting his judgment of my worth, I finally understood what it meant to have the upper hand. But I wasn't ready to play it yet. The revenge I had planned required patience, timing, and one more crucial element that I was still working to put in place. Marcus needed to want me back. Not just notice me, not just regret his mistake, but actively pursue me, chase me, need me the way I'd once needed him. Only when he was completely hooked, when he'd proven that his words about no one ever wanting me were not just wrong but laughably naive, would I spring the trap I'd been so carefully constructing. Because the most beautiful revenge isn't just proving someone wrong. It's making them realize exactly what they lost and ensuring they can never get it back. And I was just getting started. The first move came 3 weeks after that premiere. An email to my publicist's office, forwarded to me with a note asking if I wanted to respond. The subject line read, "Congratulations," and the sender was Marcus Rothwell, Esquire. My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened it, not from love or longing, but from the pure adrenaline of knowing my plan was working. "Elena," it began, formal and careful. "I saw the wonderful coverage of your recent premiere and wanted to reach out to congratulate you on your success. I always knew you had talent, and I'm thrilled to see you achieving your dreams. I'd love to catch up sometime if you're free. Perhaps dinner? Best regards, Marcus." I read it 3 times, analyzing every word choice, every subtle implication. I always knew you had talent. Already rewriting history, pretending he hadn't spent an entire evening systematically destroying my confidence and dreams. The casual invitation to dinner, as if we were old friends who'd simply lost touch rather than former lovers where one had brutally discarded the other. I let it sit in my inbox for 5 days before responding. When I finally did, I kept it brief and professionally polite. "Marcus, thank you for the kind words. I'm quite busy with upcoming projects, but perhaps our paths will cross at industry events. Best, Elena." Short, non-committal, giving him nothing to work with while leaving just enough of an opening to keep him interested. It was the first move in a chess game I intended to win. His response came within hours. "Of course, I understand how demanding your schedule must be now. I'll keep an eye out for you at events. Would love to hear about your current projects when time allows." I smiled as I deleted the email without responding. Let him wonder. Let him think about what I was working on, who I was meeting with, what opportunities were coming my way. let him start to realize that the nobody he'd dismissed now moved in circles he couldn't access without an invitation. The second encounter was at a charity gala 6 weeks later. I'd specifically chosen to attend because I knew Marcus would be there. It was an event his firm sponsored annually, and Victoria had posted about preparing for it on her Instagram. I arrived fashionably late, wearing a custom gown that hugged my curves like liquid gold, my hair swept up to show off the diamond earrings my latest film's premiere had gifted me. I worked the room like the professional I'd become, stopping to chat with directors and producers, laughing at jokes from studio executives, posing for photographs with other actors who'd become genuine friends over the past year. I was in my element now, comfortable and confident in a way that would have been impossible 3 years ago. I was talking to a prominent casting director about an upcoming HBO series when I felt a familiar presence behind me. I didn't turn around immediately, finishing my conversation first, but I could sense Marcus waiting for an opening. When the casting director finally excused herself, I turned with a bright, surprised smile. Marcus, what a pleasant surprise. He looked good, I had to admit. Still handsome in that polished way, though I noticed new lines around his eyes, a tightness to his smile that suggested stress. His gaze swept over me appreciatively, and I saw something flicker in his expression: desire, regret, possessiveness, all useful emotions for what I had planned. Elena. His voice was warmer than it had been in his emails, more personal. You look absolutely stunning. Thank you. I kept my tone friendly but not intimate, the way you'd speak to any industry acquaintance. How are you? How's Victoria? A shadow crossed his face at the mention of his fiancée. She's fine. Planning the wedding keeps her busy. How exciting. When's the big day? Next spring. He paused, studying my face as if looking for some reaction. Elena, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. About our conversation that night. Which conversation? I tilted my head innocently, as if I couldn't possibly remember the night he'd torn my life apart. At the restaurant. I may have been harsh. I was dealing with some personal issues, and I might have said things I didn't mean. There it was, the beginning of the revision, the attempt to rewrite history now that I was no longer dispensable. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest, but I kept my expression neutral. Oh, that, I waved a hand dismissively. Honestly, Marcus, I barely remember. It was so long ago, and my life has changed so dramatically since then. The lie slid off my tongue like silk. I remembered every word, every inflection, every cruel smile. But I wanted him to think I'd moved past it, that his opinion of me no longer mattered enough to leave a lasting impact. I'm glad to hear that, he said, though he looked oddly disappointed by my apparent indifference. Your success has been remarkable to watch. Thank you. I've been very fortunate. It's not fortune, Elena. It's talent. It's what I always saw in you. Another lie, another rewrite. I almost laughed at the audacity of it. You're very kind to say so. A waiter passed with champagne, and Marcus snagged 2 glasses, offering me one. I accepted it but barely sipped, wanting to keep my head clear for this conversation. I have to ask, he said, leaning closer with that conspiratorial air I remembered so well. Are you seeing anyone? I know the tabloids love to speculate, but they rarely get the real story. The tabloids definitely keep themselves entertained. I replied without answering his question. Let him wonder, let him imagine all the men who might be competing for my attention now. Because if you're not, he continued, I'd love to take you to dinner. Catch up properly. There's so much I'd like to know about your journey. I pretended to consider it, letting a small frown cross my features. I appreciate the offer, Marcus, but wouldn't that be complicated? With Victoria, I mean? Victoria and I... He hesitated, glancing around the room as if making sure she wasn't within earshot. We're in a good place, but dinner between old friends is hardly inappropriate. You're a professional contact now, after all. Old friends, professional contact. The casual way he downgraded our history, making it sound like we'd had a brief, innocent acquaintance, rather than a 6-month relationship where he'd professed to love me. I suppose you're right, I said slowly. Let me check my schedule. My assistant handles most of my appointments now. The mention of having an assistant wasn't lost on him, another marker of how far I'd risen, how much my world had expanded beyond his ability to contain or control it. Of course. Here's my card. He handed me a business card that was probably identical to the one he'd given me years ago, except now I was receiving it as an equal rather than a grateful nobody. My personal number is on the back. I tucked it into my purse without looking at it. "I'll have my people call your people," I said with a smile that was just bright enough to seem genuine. Before he could respond, I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned to see David Chen, the director who'd cast me in my breakthrough role. "Elena, I've been looking for you everywhere. There's someone I want you to meet." I allowed myself to be pulled away, but not before giving Marcus one last smile. "It was lovely seeing you again, Marcus. Give my best to Victoria." As David led me across the room, I could feel Marcus watching me go. I'd planted the seed, given him just enough encouragement to pursue, while making it clear that his window of opportunity was limited. Soon he'd be competing for my attention with people far more powerful and successful than he was, and the hunter would become the hunted. The dinner invitation came through my assistant 3 days later. Professional and persistent, requesting my availability for the following week. I had her respond that I had a brief opening the following Thursday, suggesting a quiet restaurant in West Hollywood, not the same place where he'd destroyed me, but close enough to carry symbolic weight. I spent hours preparing for that dinner, not because I wanted to impress him, but because every detail needed to be perfect for what I had planned. I chose my outfit carefully, a simple black dress that was elegant without being too formal, expensive enough to signal my success, but not flashy enough to seem desperate for attention. I had my hair styled in loose waves, my makeup done to emphasize the confidence I'd developed over the past 2 years. I arrived exactly on time, not early enough to seem eager, but not late enough to suggest disrespect. Marcus was already there, waiting at a corner table with a nervous energy I'd never seen from him before. He stood when he saw me, and I noted how his eyes swept over me appreciatively. "Elena, you look beautiful." He moved to kiss my cheek, a gesture that would have thrilled me 3 years ago but now felt calculated and presumptuous. "Thank you." I slid into the seat across from him, accepting the wine he'd already ordered. A vintage I recognized as expensive, another attempt to impress me with wealth that was no longer impressive. "I have to tell you," he said once we'd gotten through the pleasantries of ordering, "I've been following your career closely. The reviews for your last film were incredible." "The role was a gift," I replied honestly. "Complex characters are what every actor dreams of playing. And you have more projects lined up?" "A few interesting possibilities." I didn't elaborate, letting him imagine what those might be. In truth, I had 2 firm offers and 3 others in negotiation, but information was power, and I wasn't ready to give him that much insight into my life. "I have to admit," Marcus said, leaning forward slightly, "I've been thinking about you more than I probably should." "About us?" "Us?" I raised an eyebrow, genuinely curious how he planned to reframe our history. "About how things ended between us. I've been wondering if I made a mistake." The words hung in the air between us, and I felt a surge of savage satisfaction. This was what I'd been working toward, what all the success and careful positioning had been building to. Marcus Rothwell, the man who'd told me no one would ever want me, was admitting he wanted me back. A mistake? I kept my voice neutral, encouraging him to continue. I was in a complicated place then. The engagement, the pressure from my family and Victoria's family, the expectations of my career. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered from our time together. I convinced myself that marrying Victoria was the smart choice, the practical choice. And now? Now I see what I gave up? His eyes met mine across the table, and I saw genuine regret there. "Elena, you've become everything I always knew you could be. Watching your success, seeing you tonight, you're extraordinary." 3 years ago, those words would have healed every wound he'd inflicted. They were everything I'd wanted to hear during those dark weeks after our breakup, the validation I'd craved during every rejection and setback that followed. But now, hearing them, I felt only cold amusement. "That's very flattering, Marcus. I mean it. I made a mistake, a huge one. I let convention and expectation override what I really felt for you." "What you really felt for me?" I leaned back in my chair, studying his face. "And what was that exactly?" "I was falling in love with you," he said, and the sincerity in his voice was almost convincing. "Real love, not the arrangement I have with Victoria. What we had was real, Elena. It was honest and passionate and everything a relationship should be." I almost laughed at the breathtaking audacity of it. The same man who'd dismissed our relationship as fun, and nothing more, nothing less, was now trying to recast it as a great love story derailed by external pressures. "I see." I took a sip of wine, buying myself time to formulate my response. "And what about Victoria? What about your wedding?" "Victoria and I..." He hesitated, glancing around the restaurant. "We're compatible." Our families approve, our social circles overlap. It makes sense on paper. But it's not love, Elena. Not the way what we had was love. What are you saying, Marcus? He reached across the table, covering my hand with his. The touch that once would have sent electricity through my entire body now felt cold and calculating. I'm saying I want you back. I want another chance to do this right, to build something real together. Something based on what we actually feel for each other, not what other people expect. There it was. The moment I'd been orchestrating for over a year, the admission that proved everything he'd said about my worth had been a lie designed to make his betrayal easier to justify. That's a lot to process, I said quietly, not pulling my hand away but not responding to his touch either. You're engaged, Marcus. Your wedding is in a few months. Engagements can be broken. It would be complicated, expensive, but it can be done. His grip on my hand tightened. For the right reasons. For you. I let him see uncertainty in my expression, let him think I was genuinely torn by his offer. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. Say you'll give us another chance. Marcus, I pulled my hand back, wrapping it around my wine glass. This is all very sudden. I need time to think. Of course. I understand. He leaned back, giving me space but keeping his eyes fixed on my face. I just want you to know that I'm serious about this. About us. I know I hurt you before, and I'll spend however long it takes making up for that. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of careful conversation. Marcus shared more about his realization that he'd made a mistake, painting himself as a man who'd sacrificed true love for social expectations, but was now ready to fight for what really mattered. I played the part of the successful woman who was flattered but cautious, who needed time to process this unexpected development. When he walked me to my car, he tried to kiss me goodnight. I turned my head at the last moment, letting his lips brush my cheek instead. Good night, Marcus, I said softly. Thank you for dinner, and for your honesty. Think about what I said, Elena. About us. I will. I drove home with my hands shaking, not from emotion but from the pure adrenaline of performance. Phase 1 of my revenge was complete. Marcus wanted me back, desperately enough to consider breaking his engagement. Now came the delicate part, keeping him hooked while I prepared for the final act. The flowers arrived the next morning. 24 white roses with a card that read, "Thank you for a perfect evening." I meant every word. M. I had my assistant send a polite thank you text, but nothing more. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus launched a full-court press. More flowers, thoughtful gifts that referenced our shared history, invitations to exclusive events where he could show me off to his professional contacts. He was treating me like a prize to be won, a status symbol that would elevate his own position in the industry. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so perfectly suited to my plans. I accepted some invitations and declined others, always keeping him guessing about my level of interest. When we did appear together publicly, I made sure to be charming and radiant, but never so affectionate that it suggested we were officially together. I was a woman considering her options, not one who'd already made her choice. The entertainment press started to notice. Subtle mentions in gossip columns about rising star Elena Martinez being seen around town with prominent entertainment lawyer Marcus Rothwell. Speculation about whether Hollywood's newest it girl was dating the high-powered attorney, despite his engagement to socialite Victoria Pemberton. I watched Marcus's confidence grow with each public appearance, each photo that suggested he'd successfully won me back. He started talking about our future, in vague but ambitious terms, painting a picture of a power couple who could dominate both the creative and business sides of the entertainment industry. We could be unstoppable together. He told me one night after a gallery opening where we'd been photographed looking intimate. Your talent and my connections, your rising star power and my established network. We could build an empire, Elena. I smiled and let him pull me closer in the back of the car he'd hired for the evening. It's an interesting thought. More than interesting. It's inevitable. We belong together, I can see that now. I was just too blind to recognize it before. And Victoria? Victoria was a mistake. A safe choice that would have been a lifetime of mediocrity. He traced his finger along my cheek. You're the choice that leads to greatness. I had to admire his ability to rewrite history so completely. Victoria, who'd been perfect enough to warrant a 2-year engagement and elaborate wedding plans, was now relegated to a safe mistake. I was no longer the nobody waitress he'd dismissed, but the key to his future empire. When will you tell her? I asked. Soon. I want to make sure you're really committed to this first. I need to know you're all in, Elena, because once I break things off with Victoria, there's no going back. I understand. I leaned against his shoulder, letting him think I was surrendering to the fantasy he'd constructed. This is all happening so fast. The best things always do. That night, after he dropped me off at my apartment, I sat on my balcony overlooking the city lights and allowed myself to feel the full scope of what I'd accomplished. Marcus Rothwell, the man who'd crushed my spirit and dismissed my dreams, was now willing to blow up his carefully constructed life for another chance with me. The nobody he'd written off was now the woman he considered essential to his future success. But I wasn't done yet. The revenge I'd planned required one more element, one final twist that would make his downfall complete. Because it wasn't enough for him to want me back, I needed him to lose everything in the process of trying to get me. The opportunity came from an unexpected source. Victoria Pemberton called my publicist directly, requesting a private meeting. She'd figured out what was happening between Marcus and me, and she wanted to discuss it face to face. We met at an upscale cafe in Beverly Hills, neutral territory where we could speak freely without being overheard. Victoria was even more beautiful in person than in her Instagram photos, with the kind of refined elegance that comes from generations of good breeding and unlimited resources. But there was steel underneath the polished exterior, a sharpness that suggested she was nobody's fool. "I think we both know why we're here," she said without preamble once we'd ordered coffee. "I assume this is about Marcus?" "It is." She studied my face with the calculating gaze of someone accustomed to evaluating threats. "I want to know what your intentions are." I could have played dumb, pretended I didn't know what she was talking about, but I sensed that Victoria would respect directness more than deception. "Marcus has expressed interest in rekindling our relationship," I said carefully, "despite being engaged to me." "Yes." She leaned back in her chair, and I was surprised to see something that looked almost like relief in her expression. "Can I be frank with you, Elena? Please. Marcus and I are not a love match. Our engagement is a business arrangement that benefits both our families. I've known about his extracurricular activities for some time. I felt my carefully constructed plan shift slightly as this new information settled in. You knew about me? Originally, I mean? I suspected there was someone. Marcus isn't particularly discreet when he's feeling guilty." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I chose to ignore it because it didn't threaten the fundamental arrangement between us. "And now? Now he's talking about breaking our engagement." "That does threaten the arrangement." Victoria leaned forward, her voice dropping to a confidential tone. "My father's company has several projects with Marcus's firm. The merger of our families was supposed to cement those business relationships." "I see. If Marcus breaks our engagement to pursue you, it will be professionally and socially catastrophic for him. My family won't just end their business relationship, they'll actively work to undermine his career. He'll lose his biggest clients, his social standing, his reputation in the industry." I felt a chill of excitement run through me. This was even better than what I'd planned. Victoria was offering to help destroy Marcus's life, and all I had to do was continue playing my part. "What are you proposing?" I asked. "I'm proposing we let him hang himself." Victoria's smile turned genuinely cold. "You continue to encourage his pursuit. Let him think you're genuinely considering a future together. I'll act like the betrayed fiancé, wounded and shocked by his sudden change of heart. And then? Then, at the moment when he's most committed to you, when he's burned all his bridges with my family and made it public that he's choosing you over his engagement, you reject him. Completely and definitively." I stared at her, seeing my own capacity for calculated revenge reflected in her composed features. "Why would you want to do that? Why not just end things cleanly?" "Because Marcus Rothwell needs to learn that actions have consequences. He's spent years treating women like disposable conveniences, secure in the knowledge that his wealth and position would protect him from any real repercussions." Her eyes glittered with cold fury. "It's time someone taught him otherwise." We sat in silence for a moment, two women who'd been underestimated by the same man, now planning his systematic destruction. "What would you need from me?" I asked finally. "Nothing you weren't already planning to do. Continue the relationship, let him fall deeper, encourage his delusions about your future together. I'll handle the rest." "And afterwards?" "Afterwards, Marcus will discover that burning bridges has consequences. He'll lose me, lose you, lose his professional standing, and quite possibly his firm's biggest clients." Victoria finished her coffee with elegant composure. "It seems like a fitting outcome for someone who thinks he can have everything without paying any price." I left that meeting with my head spinning. Victoria had offered me revenge beyond my wildest dreams, not just the satisfaction of rejecting Marcus, but the opportunity to watch his entire carefully constructed life crumble as a result of his pursuit of me. It was poetic justice so perfect it almost seemed too good to be true. But it also meant extending the deception longer than I'd originally planned, letting Marcus fall even deeper before delivering the killing blow. It meant more dinners, more fake smiles, more pretending to consider a future with a man I despised. The thought was exhausting, but the promise of total victory made it worthwhile. Over the next month, I threw myself into the performance with renewed dedication. I let Marcus believe he was winning me over, that his persistence and grand gestures were slowly breaking down my resistance. I attended his social events, met his professional contacts, played the part of the rising star who might just be willing to tie her future to his. The entertainment press ate it up. Articles speculated about Hollywood's newest power couple, photographers captured us at premieres and charity galas, and industry insiders whispered about how Marcus Rothwell had somehow managed to land the most sought-after young actress in town. I watched Marcus's confidence grow with each public appearance. He started acting like he'd already won, making plans for our future, talking about the projects we could develop together once we were officially a couple. He introduced me to his law partners as if I were already his fiancée, making it clear to everyone in his professional circle that he intended to break his engagement for me. Meanwhile, Victoria played her part perfectly. She started appearing at events alone, citing Marcus's busy schedule when asked about his absence. She posted less frequently on social media, and when she did, the photos had a melancholy quality that suggested trouble in paradise. The society gossips began whispering about cracks in the perfect engagement. The turning point came at a major industry awards ceremony where Marcus had tickets to one of the most exclusive after-parties. He'd been building up to something all week, dropping hints about a serious conversation we needed to have about being ready to make big changes. In his life, I wore a stunning red gown that made me feel like a warrior going into battle, my hair and makeup perfect, my confidence at its peak. This was the night Marcus would make his choice official, and it would be the beginning of the end for him. The ceremony itself was a blur of presentations and acceptance speeches, but I was focused entirely on the conversation I knew was coming. Marcus was electric with nervous energy beside me, constantly checking his phone, adjusting his tie, clearing his throat like he was preparing for a major presentation. At the after-party, he maneuvered us to a quiet corner of the venue, away from the main crowd but still visible to the photographers and other industry figures. The location was deliberate. He wanted witnesses to whatever was about to happen. "Elena," he began, his voice carrying the weight of decision. "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" I turned to face him fully, letting him see the attention and interest in my expression. "I've made a decision about Victoria, about us." He took my hands in his, the gesture intimate and possessive. "I'm calling off the engagement." I let shock register on my face, followed quickly by uncertainty. "Marcus, are you sure? That's a huge step." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." His grip on my hands tightened. "What we have, Elena, it's real. It's worth fighting for. I'm not going to let convention or family expectations or business considerations stop me from being with the woman I love. The woman I love." He said it with such conviction, such apparent sincerity, that for a moment I almost believed he meant it. But I knew better now. Marcus didn't love me. He loved the idea of me, the status and excitement I represented. He loved having something other men wanted, loved the validation of winning back the woman he'd once discarded. "I love you too," I whispered, the lie sliding off my tongue like silk. "But your engagement, your family, the social complications, none of that matters." He cupped my face in his hands, oblivious to the cameras that were undoubtedly capturing this moment. "You matter. We matter. I'm going to tell Victoria tomorrow, officially end things, and then I want to be with you. Publicly, completely, without any more hiding or uncertainty." I let tears gather in my eyes, tears of joy as far as he could tell. "Are you absolutely certain? Once you do this, there's no going back." "There's no going back anyway, Elena. I'm already yours, completely and irrevocably." "I have been since that night at dinner when I realized what an idiot I'd been to let you go." "Perfect. Absolutely perfect." He was handing me everything I needed for his destruction, gift-wrapped with declarations of love and public witnesses. "Then yes," I breathed, rising up on my toes to kiss him softly. "Yes to all of it." The kiss was captured by at least 3 different photographers, and I knew that by tomorrow morning it would be splashed across every entertainment website and gossip blog in the city. Marcus Rothwell publicly choosing rising star Elena Martinez over his longtime fiancée Victoria Pemberton. As we broke apart, I saw the triumph in Marcus's eyes, the satisfaction of a man who believed he'd just secured the prize he'd been chasing. He had no idea that he'd actually just signed his own professional death warrant. "I'll call Victoria first thing in the morning," he said, his arm around my waist as we rejoined the party. "And then I want to take you somewhere special to celebrate properly." "I can't wait," I replied, leaning into his embrace for the benefit of the watching crowd. But inside, I was already counting down the hours until I could drop the mask and show him exactly what I really thought of his declarations of love. Marcus Rothwell was about to learn that some dishes are worth waiting years to serve cold. The news broke the next day exactly as planned. Photos of our kiss at the after-party accompanied headlines speculating about Marcus's relationship status and Victoria's response to being publicly humiliated. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters and gossip bloggers, all wanting a statement about my relationship with the prominent lawyer. I had my publicist issue a brief statement saying that I was happy but preferred to keep my personal life private, which only fueled more speculation. Meanwhile, Victoria played her part beautifully, appearing to be blindsided by the public nature of Marcus's betrayal while maintaining her dignity in the face of humiliation. Marcus called me 3 times before noon, breathless with excitement about finally being free to pursue our relationship openly. He'd spoken to Victoria, he said, officially ended their engagement despite her tears and pleas. The wedding was off, the invitations would be rescinded, and he was ready to start our new life together. "I've never felt so liberated," he told me over lunch at an exclusive restaurant where he'd specifically requested a visible table. "It's like I've been living someone else's life for years, and now I finally get to be myself." "How did Victoria take it?" I asked, playing the concerned girlfriend. "She was devastated, of course. But I think she'll understand eventually that this is better for everyone. We were never right for each other, not the way you and I are." I nodded sympathetically while privately marveling at his ability to reframe his betrayal as a kindness. In Marcus's version of events, he wasn't a man who'd publicly humiliated his fiancée by kissing another woman at a major industry event. He was a romantic hero who'd chosen love over convention. "What about your practice? Will this affect your business relationships?" A shadow crossed his face, the first sign that reality was beginning to intrude on his fantasy. "There might be some short-term complications. Victoria's father was a significant client and he's not pleased with how things developed. But business is business. Eventually, everyone will move on." I could see that he was trying to convince himself as much as me. The entertainment industry was built on relationships and reputation, and Marcus had just spectacularly damaged both by breaking his engagement in such a public, humiliating way. Over the next week, I watched the consequences begin to unfold exactly as Victoria had predicted. Marcus's law firm lost 2 major clients immediately, both citing irreconcilable differences that everyone understood were related to the Victoria situation. Other clients began expressing concerns about the firm's stability and professional judgment. Meanwhile, the entertainment press was having a field day with the story. Photos of Marcus and me appeared daily, accompanied by increasingly dramatic headlines about our passionate romance and Victoria's public heartbreak. I was painted as the seductive starlet who'd stolen another woman's fiancé, while Marcus was portrayed as either a romantic hero or a callous cad, depending on the publication. Through it all, I played my part perfectly. I appeared besotted with Marcus, grateful for his sacrifice, excited about our future together. I accompanied him to events where his professional contacts could see us together, letting him parade me around like a trophy he'd won. But privately, I was counting down the days until I could execute the final phase of my plan. Because while Marcus thought he'd won everything, he'd actually lost far more than he realized. And soon he'd lose the rest. The moment came exactly 2 weeks after the engagement announcement at another industry event where Marcus had specifically wanted to make an appearance as a couple. It was a premiere for a major studio film, the kind of red carpet event that would be covered by every entertainment outlet in the city. We arrived together in the limousine Marcus had hired for the occasion, and I could feel his pride as we posed for photographers on the red carpet. He was living his fantasy of being part of a Hollywood power couple, blissfully unaware that his world was about to come crashing down. Inside the theater, during the film, I excused myself to the restroom. Instead, I slipped out a side exit and into the alley where Victoria was waiting in her car, exactly as we'd arranged. "Are you ready?" she asked as I slid into the passenger seat. "I've been ready for 3 years," I replied. Victoria smiled, and there was something almost admiring in her expression. "He has no idea what's coming, does he?" "None whatsoever." She handed me a manila envelope thick with documents. "Everything you need is in there. Financial records, client lists, correspondence that proves he's been using insider information to benefit his personal investments. My father's investigators are very thorough." I stared at the envelope, understanding immediately what she was offering. This wasn't just personal revenge anymore. This was professional destruction on a scale I'd never imagined. "This will end his career," I said quietly. "Completely and permanently," Victoria confirmed. "No law firm will touch him after this. He'll be lucky to avoid criminal charges." "Why are you going this far?" Victoria's expression hardened. "Because men like Marcus need to understand that there are consequences for treating women as disposable. Because he destroyed you once and tried to do the same to me. Because he thinks his charm and connections make him untouchable." She was right, of course. Marcus had built his entire life on the assumption that he could manipulate and discard people without facing any real consequences. It was time to prove him wrong. "What do you need me to do?" "Go back inside. Finish the evening as planned. Tomorrow morning you'll reject him completely, not just romantically but publicly and devastatingly. Make sure he understands that you never forgave him for what he did to you 3 years ago, that everything since then has been an act designed to destroy him. And the documents? Leave those to me. By the time you're done with him emotionally, his professional life will already be in ruins." I returned to the theater and slipped back into my seat beside Marcus, who squeezed my hand without taking his eyes off the screen. He had no idea that I'd just signed his professional death warrant, no clue that the woman sitting beside him was about to become his worst nightmare. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of after-party conversations and photo opportunities. Marcus was in his element, introducing me to industry contacts, talking about the projects we might develop together, basking in the attention our relationship was generating. "I can't believe how perfect everything is," he whispered to me as we danced at the after-party. 3 years ago, I thought I was making the smart choice, the practical choice. But look at us now. This is what real success feels like. I smiled up at him, letting him see adoration in my eyes instead of the cold satisfaction that was actually there. "It does feel perfect," I agreed. "I love you, Elena. More than I've ever loved anyone. I love you too," I replied, and it was the last lie I would ever tell him. We spent the night at his Beverly Hills house, the one he'd never brought me to during our original relationship because it was too close to his real life with Victoria. Now I was the real life, the future he'd chosen, the woman worth risking everything for. I lay awake beside him as he slept, studying his face in the moonlight streaming through the windows. He looked peaceful, content, completely unaware that this was the last night of his old life. Tomorrow, Marcus Rothwell would discover exactly what it meant to be discarded by someone who no longer found him useful. I was going to enjoy every second of it. The call came at 6 a.m., just as I'd expected. Victoria's voice was crisp and professional, all business despite the early hour. "It's done," she said simply. "The documents have been delivered to the State Bar Association, the FBI's white-collar crime division, and 3 major entertainment industry publications. By noon, everyone in the city will know what kind of man Marcus really is." I felt a surge of savage satisfaction. "How long do we have? A few hours before it goes public?" "Enough time for you to have your conversation with him first." "Perfect." Marcus was still sleeping when I hung up the phone. I showered and dressed carefully, choosing clothes that were elegant but not seductive, professional rather than romantic. I wanted to look like the successful actress I'd become, not the desperate waitress I'd once been. When Marcus finally woke up, he found me sitting in his kitchen with coffee and the morning papers spread out before me. He padded in wearing a robe, hair tousled, smiling with the satisfied contentment of a man who thought he had everything he wanted. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, leaning down to kiss the top of my head. "You're up early." I couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind. He poured himself coffee and settled into the chair across from me. Anything you want to talk about? Actually, yes. I folded the newspaper and looked directly at him. I've been thinking about what you said last night. About love, about our future together. And his smile was warm, expectant. And I think you're right. We should be completely honest with each other. No more secrets, no more hidden agendas. I agree completely. He reached across the table to take my hand. Total honesty from now on. Good. I pulled my hand away gently and leaned back in my chair. Then let me start by being honest about something I've been keeping from you. Something in my tone must have alerted him, because his smile faltered slightly. What do you mean? I mean that everything between us for the past 6 months has been a lie. I kept my voice calm, conversational, like I was discussing the weather. I never forgave you for what you did to me 3 years ago, Marcus. I never forgot a single word you said that night in the restaurant. The color drained from his face. Elena, what are you talking about? I'm talking about revenge, I said simply. Cold, calculated, perfectly executed revenge. He stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. That's not funny, Elena. It's not meant to be funny. It's meant to be devastating. I smiled, and I knew it wasn't a nice smile. Do you remember what you told me that night? About how no one would ever want me? About how I was ordinary and forgettable and would never amount to anything? Elena, I was upset. I said things I didn't mean. Oh, but you did mean them. Every word. I could see it in your eyes, Marcus. The complete contempt you felt for me, the casual cruelty of someone discarding something worthless. He was starting to understand now. I could see the horror dawning in his expression as he realized what I was telling him. So I decided to prove you wrong, I continued. Not just by becoming successful, but by making you want me back so desperately that you'd destroy your own life trying to get me. You can't be serious. Dead serious. I spent 3 years building my career and planning your destruction. Every interaction we've had since that premiere, every dinner, every kiss, every declaration of love, it was all part of the plan. Marcus stood up abruptly, knocking over his coffee cup. You're lying. What we have is real, Elena. I love you. No, you don't. I remained seated, calm and composed while he paced frantically around the kitchen. You love the idea of me? You love having something other men want. You love the status and excitement I represent, but you don't love me, Marcus. You're not capable of loving anyone but yourself. That's not true, isn't it? 3 years ago, you told me I was nobody. Yesterday, you called me the love of your life. The only thing that changed was my market value. He stopped pacing and stared at me with growing desperation. Even if that's true, what we have now is real. You can't fake what happened between us. I laughed, and the sound was cold and sharp in the quiet kitchen. I'm an actress, Marcus. A very good one, as it turns out. Faking emotions is literally what I do for a living. I don't believe you. No one could sustain a lie for this long, be this cruel. You were this cruel, I interrupted. You destroyed a young woman who loved you completely, who would have done anything for you. You crushed her dreams and her spirit and then walked away without a second thought. I made a mistake. No, you made a choice. A deliberate, calculated choice to cause maximum damage because it was convenient for you. I stood up, smoothing down my skirt. Well, now it's my turn to make a choice. Elena, please. Whatever I did before, I'll make it up to you. We can start over, build something real. We can't start over, Marcus, because I despise you. I despise everything about you. Your arrogance, your entitlement, your complete lack of empathy for anyone who isn't useful to you. He sank back into his chair, the reality of the situation finally hitting him. What do you want? Money? A starring role in something? Name it, and I'll make it happen. I don't want anything from you. I already have everything I need. I picked up my purse and headed toward the door. Your destruction is complete, Marcus. By noon today, everyone in this city will know exactly what kind of man you really are. What are you talking about? I paused at the kitchen doorway and turned back to him. Victoria and I have been working together, you see. She's not quite the naive socialite you took her for. While you were chasing me around like a lovesick puppy, she was gathering evidence of your various financial improprieties. The blood drained from his face completely. Evidence of what? Insider trading? Client fund misappropriation? Tax evasion? Should I go on? Apparently, you've been very busy building your empire through some questionable methods. You can't prove any of that. We already have. The State Bar Association received a very comprehensive package this morning, along with several federal agencies and entertainment industry publications. Marcus gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles went white. Elena, you don't understand what you're doing. If this gets out, it doesn't just destroy me. It affects everyone at my firm, their families, their livelihoods. Should have thought of that before you decided to build your success on fraud and betrayal, I replied without sympathy. Actions have consequences, Marcus. You taught me that. Please, he whispered, and for the first time since I'd known him, Marcus Rothwell looked genuinely desperate. Don't do this. I know I hurt you, but this is too much. This destroys everything. Good, I said simply. That was the point. I walked to the front door, Marcus following behind me like a broken man. At the threshold, I turned for one final look at the person who'd once made me feel worthless. One last thing, Marcus. You were wrong about me. Completely devastatingly wrong. People do want me, directors, producers, fans, critics. I'm not ordinary or forgettable or background noise. I'm extraordinary, and I always was. You were just too blind and arrogant to see it. Elena, wait! But I was already walking away, down the stone path toward my car. Behind me, I could hear Marcus calling my name, pleading with me to come back, to reconsider, to show mercy he'd never shown me. I didn't look back. The news broke exactly as Victoria had predicted. By noon, Marcus Rothwell's name was trending on social media, but not for his high-profile romance. Entertainment websites led with headlines about the federal investigation into his financial practices, while gossip blogs focused on the revelation that his public romance had been an elaborate revenge plot. I spent the day in my apartment, ignoring calls from reporters and watching the story unfold across every major news platform. The photos of Marcus and me at various events were now being recontextualized as evidence of my masterful deception, while legal experts speculated about the severity of the charges he might face. Victoria called that evening, her voice warm with satisfaction. I have to say, Elena, you played your part beautifully. That final scene in his kitchen was worthy of an Oscar. He had it coming. I replied, surprising myself with how calm I felt. How are things on your end? Perfect. The engagement is officially over, the wedding canceled, and my father's business relationships with Marcus's firm have been permanently severed. Oh, and I've been getting sympathy calls all day from people who think I'm devastated by the betrayal. Are you devastated? Victoria laughed, a sound of pure delight. Devastated? I feel like I've been liberated. No more pretending to love a man I barely tolerated. No more fake smiles at society events. No more building my life around someone else's ambitions. What will you do now? Live my life on my own terms for the first time in 30 years. Travel, maybe go back to school. Definitely stay away from men who think women are accessories to their success. We talked for a few more minutes. Two women who'd joined forces to topple a man who'd underestimated both of us. When I hung up, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't expected. The anger that had driven me for 3 years was finally gone, replaced by something calmer and more satisfying. Justice. Real, tangible justice for every cruel word, every dismissive gesture, every moment Marcus had made me feel small and worthless. The aftermath unfolded over the following weeks like a master class in the consequences of hubris. Marcus's law firm dropped him immediately to avoid further scandal. The State Bar Association suspended his license pending a full investigation. Federal prosecutors announced they were considering charges related to the financial improprieties Victoria had uncovered. But perhaps most satisfying of all was watching his social and professional standing crumble. The same people who'd once courted his favor now crossed the street to avoid him. Restaurants that had once held his regular table suddenly had no availability. Industry events that had welcomed him for years quietly removed his name from their invitation lists. Marcus had built his identity on being wanted, needed, essential to other people's success. Now he was toxic, a liability no one could afford to associate with. He'd become exactly what he'd once told me I was. Nobody who mattered. I, meanwhile, continued to thrive. The publicity from the revenge story, rather than damaging my career, had actually enhanced it. I was seen as a woman who'd refused to be victimized, who'd turned personal betrayal into professional triumph. Offers poured in from directors who admired my strength and resilience. 6 months after that final morning in Marcus's kitchen, I won my first major award, a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actress in the HBO series I'd started filming just as the revenge story broke. Standing on that stage, holding the statue, looking out at an audience of the most powerful people in the entertainment industry, I thought about the girl who'd once been told no one would ever want her. That girl was gone, replaced by someone stronger, more calculating, more aware of her own worth. I'd proven that I could be wanted, could be valued, could be extraordinary. But more than that, I'd proven that I could be dangerous to anyone who tried to make me feel otherwise. In my acceptance speech, I thanked the usual people, my agents, my publicist, my family, but I ended with a line that anyone who knew the story would understand. And finally, I said, looking directly into the camera, to anyone who's ever been told they're not good enough, that they'll never amount to anything, that no one will ever want them, prove them wrong. But more than that, make them pay for their mistake. The audience erupted in applause, but I knew Marcus was watching somewhere, and I knew he understood the message was for him. That night, at the after party, I was surrounded by congratulations and praise, by people who wanted to work with me, to be associated with my success. I was everything Marcus had said I could never be: wanted, respected, powerful in my own right. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt truly at peace. The revenge was complete. Marcus Rothwell had learned too late that some people are worth wanting, and that dismissing them is the biggest mistake you can make. I'd proven that I wasn't nobody, wasn't forgettable, wasn't ordinary. I was extraordinary, and everyone who mattered knew it. No one would ever underestimate Elena Martinez again. As I drove home from the party that night, a ward on the passenger seat beside me, I thought about the girl I'd been and the woman I'd become. The transformation hadn't been easy, hadn't been quick, but it had been worth every moment of pain and planning and patient execution. Marcus had tried to break me, but instead he'd forged me into something stronger. Someone who understood that power isn't given, it's taken. Someone who knew that the best revenge isn't just living well, but making sure the people who hurt you know exactly how well you're living. I pulled into my garage and sat for a moment in the silence, letting the satisfaction wash over me one final time. Then I picked up my Golden Globe and walked into my beautiful home, ready to start the next chapter of my extraordinary life. After all, I had a lot more wanting to do, and the whole world was finally ready to see just how much I was worth.